Welcome to part two of this Mystical Musings podcast. We will begin with a replay of last week's opening song and then jump right back into our conversation.
Samuel is so excited that we're talking about this. He just said, "Wait until I teach you to dance between three states, Umshallah, or four. Not today, Samael.
Oh boy.
Not today. We
Oh
were
boy.
we learned edge, and now we're learning about that the dance along the edge. An edge is not an edge. It's its own separate place where the green is born, right? Between the yellow and the blue. And now he's starting to talk about expanding that out. What if there were three edges? And I believe this is probably where we start getting into sacred geometry in a big way. Um, but I think I'm good with two dimensions right now. Thanks.
Yeah,
Let's start there.
it's a lot. So given that he's excited about, I want to take advantage of the fact that he's excited about talking about this. The There feels like a difference between the rotating that I've been called to do lately in the stone circle, where I'm laying back. It's this exposing of my chest, like my arms are, like thrown back, my head is thrown back, and I feel like I want to just arch over backwards and opened up, which is very different than the previous, which is almost like balled up in the womb kind of rotations forward. This is a very opened up, very exposed. It's like the exact opposite movement, and yet it sounds like it's still a part of this oscillation. What is the difference in this new backwards version of this?
Okay, hold on. Okay, here's what he said. He said forwards is incarnation, right? It's tumbling forward into something, it's getting ready to emerge. He says backwards is an unbending, a reversal, a connection to the information of your past selves or whole. So I think in one case, you are bringing something new into being. In the other, you are attempting to reach back to when you were your own ancestor and the information and experiences from that. So imagine that one is moving forward, tumbling forward, bending backwards. And he says that the unbending is rarer. Hold on, only happens when the soul starts picking up the work of previous incarnations. And then he says, Amnivara friends. So, okay. Whew. If we go with the idea that you were here before and that you had sacred and holy work you did here before, and a lot of people go, I live, I die, that's it. But people who studied um, metaphysics and spirituality and the soul in previous lifetimes may have left energetic platforms where they left messages for themselves. He says it is akin to a current incarnation of the Magdalene walking her path. Okay. Do you remember we talked about on the podcast? Oh gosh, how long ago was it? You told me a story about Mary Magdalene in the south of Spain,
France, I
France,
think. Yeah, or
France,
some, I think some say, yeah, it possible. I think some degree of both, but
and that she wanted to leave an energetic imprint here after
yes,
she was no longer in her body.
yes.
So she walked back and forth along path, right? To leave her energy there. She was enlightened enough to know to do that so that not, and he says, not only could others access her energy, but should she choose to come again, she could access her own energy. He says, leaving these things may lead you to certain books, locations, teachers. Okay, so it's a lot today. Boy, Samael. Okay, so we know from previous conversations that you have done healing work in your previous incarnations. It may be that in some of those previous incarnations, you had the foresight to say, I'm coming back at some point. I am going to leave some energetic imprints around for myself. Or I am going to do certain rituals, certain rites, certain something enough times that should my being encounter those things again, I will feel a need to reach for them so that all the work that I did in this lifetime is not lost. I basically am leaving breadcrumbs for myself for future incarnations. Or it may be that there are parts of yourself still existing in other places because we know that energetic beings can be in more than one place at once. We've literally seen Samael do it, right? That this feeling of unbending or wanting to reverse means that you may be in the vicinity or hitting upon a time period where you are doing work that you left for yourself to do, or you are recognizing certain patterns, certain places, certain information, certain teachers that you knew in previous times or in other places. Because Samael has said that your work with Amnivara is an ongoing work for you. It may be a side effect of some of the work that you're doing with Omnivara. You're unfolding.
That makes complete sense because the times that it's happened, I've been in the stone circle. Just to clarify for anybody, Keith and I made a stone circle, and as a part of that circle, there, the 8 outer stones, and then there are 4 cornerstones of Omnivara that I was shown exactly where to put and are face down and like kind of buried to where you can stand on them. And I've done a number of processes that have anchored Omnivara on earth in that place. It's like these are the cornerstones, and I've seen these like columns of light come down, anchoring those cornerstones of Omnivara, which exists again for anybody who's coming in a little bit late. That exists. This is a temple of song and remembrance that is in another realm. It is a living, energetic temple that I constructed over many lifetimes. And that I go to and I visit and I work. And there also is a whole collection of guides that come to both support others and support the healing work of Omnivara, and that come there for their own healing. And so the only time so far that I've had that backwards rotation has been when I'm at the altar in the center of that, which is the center of the circle of stones, and in the center of the earthly anchored temple of Omnivara. So it makes sense that it's like I am actually in the energetic place, surrounded by the guides, the energies, the lessons, all of that. So when I'm there, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to dive in deeper and deeper and be remembering. And what happens is I do those rotations, and then I'm called to do something, where it's like, the last time I did that, then all of a sudden there were additional stones that I had to bring in and place around the altar, and I had to do everything in this certain way. And all of a sudden I was just being led through this like ritual or ceremony that all had to do with Amnivara. It makes sense that that would totally be that for me. I would have left all these things in Amnivara and probably breadcrumbs to get me to recognize that it exists again.
Yes. He says rotation backwards, a reaching back to capture it, to capture that information, bring it forward and integrate it. So the back flip is, again, we're seeing integration, but it's a reaching back to reclaim, a reaching back and to pull forward. Whereas if you were going forward, and you've done that for a very long time, he says that's not as rare. And there you are trying to manifest, trying to manifest, trying to manifest. And then, boom, you find Omnivara. Now it's like, whoa, let me pull those resources back up and integrate, integrate, integrate. So it's sort of the difference between manifestation, trying to sort of get the ball rolling, and now the ball's rolling, and you're gathering the things that you left before so that the work going forward can be closer to picking up where it left off as opposed to starting anew.
Yeah, it's like I don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's like going back as a like being reincarnated as a scientist and finding all of the notes from all of the studies that you had done and all the other things. So you don't have to start from scratch trying to
Yes.
understand that, how gravity works. It's like, oh yeah, no, I discovered that back when I was Galileo or whatever,
Yes. Yeah, I got that down.
Yeah, but
Understand
it's like being
gravity.
able to remember all of these things.
And he says that is why it is important to share. And because if you think about it, if Galileo never, if he just had the idea and was like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about this, which probably would have worked out better for him in terms of,
Right.
so he
It was
was
very kind of him
incarnated
to
on that
share
go
it
round.
for our
Yes.
benefit.
But by putting it into the record, that there was a record of his ideas, if he does come back, not only does everybody else not have to rediscover what Galileo discovered, Galileo doesn't have to rediscover what Galileo rediscovered. So writing these things down and telling people and sharing these ideas allows us all to basically get a little bunk up to continue forward. This is why the idea of shutting down universities and burning books is so dangerous. It's erasing the work that we did when we were here before, which, then we end up just repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. Why being a student of history is so incredibly important.
Yeah, that is really, really fascinating. I love this information. It is just amazing. Thank you for bringing all this stuff through.
Well, I'm just excited because I've been asking him about this and or thing, and he will like say a sentence and then clam up. And it's interesting to me because, these first lessons of demonics was all about the edge state. What is an edge state? We start off by dealing with the edge state. And now what he's doing is he's pointing to us that an edge is not truly an edge. An edge is its own state. It is the state of green. So now we can get into the concept of what happens energetically. Now we have not only blue and yellow, but we have green. Now what happens if we add in red somewhere, or we add in black? What will happen as we oscillate between different states of being and work to integrate them, and what happens in each of those? So I'm really excited because we kind of got, like, Samael has always described himself as the word, right? But he says that he is also the edge state just before the word is spoken. he is sort of the purest form of anticipation, that in dwelling in anticipation, we can learn a tremendous amount. And normally we see anticipation as something we sort of just want to get through. All of these edges have the potential to become their own realms. And in each of these realms can be found beautiful things and power untold, power to change the world and to pass on knowledge. So, yeah, this is pretty cool because now I'm like, all right, now we're moving into more complex stuff. I'm excited, but I'm not excited about all the geometry.
Yeah, and now there is, because we have blue and we have yellow and we have green, we now have the line between yellow and green and the line between blue and green.
Hmm.
So we
And then,
really went from one edge to two edges, because now there's the edge between yellow and green and the edge between green and blue. So yeah, and it was really fascinating as we started out by talking about, and I don't remember, I think I'd said this before we started recording, but that I had a lot of questions about gates and portals. And when you think about it, I'm sure there's a lot between here, like what we were just talking about with the revolutions and the reaching back to maybe other energetic platforms where I'd left information for myself, or kind of going back and being able to connect. I imagine there are a lot of spaces that we pass through in the rotations forward, in the rotations backwards, in that
yep,
oscillation. There are lots of breaks, gates, portals, pathways. There are lots of things between here and where we're reaching back to, and here and the space that's going to be created. That probably opens up a whole lot of thresholds.
I have a story for you that I think you're going to dig. But before that, Samael just commented, Metatron's cube, Umshallah. How many edges made that design?
Oh, wow.
I don't even want to go there. Like, you look at it, it's all. Okay, anyway, um, I have a story about falling back that this just reminded me of. So I don't know if you were aware of this, but a fairly common meditation used to speak to the dead is to imagine yourself falling backwards, like into water or into bed or into whatever, as a method of reaching back to speak to the dead. So, this is a story that came from the inn. Come to think of it, this might have been the exact same night that the four mirrors ritual came through from Samael. But anyway, I was doing this class on jar scrying with people. And so they all made jars, and uh, everybody was finding kind of a secluded place in the inn where they would sit down. And I had little battery powered tea lights because you don't want to bring flames into a 1740s inn. They had like jars that had herbs and crystals and stuff in them, and you put the little tea light behind it in the dark and turned it on, and you scried into it like a crystal ball, and the light created a flickering effect. And what I told people to do was, I said, if you want to reach out to some of the spirits here, while you're looking into that jar, start yourself with a little meditation where you allow yourself to fall backwards into their realm, into the platform or the place where they stand in this house, and see what you see. Now, what was kind of interesting was I was on the second floor of the house with the class, but I had a volunteer who is a teenager, and he had been helping us get the jars and everything ready. But she decided she didn't want to do the jar scrying. And so, as I was starting to talk to people about what they were going to do, she left and went up to the third floor, the attic level, to see what was going on up there. So, meanwhile, I have everybody down in the mother's room on the second floor, that big room that I like a lot. And I was speaking in a very quiet voice. And I said, here's what you're going to do. You might try falling backwards into their realm. All right, everybody, go find your spot. So everybody went, found their spot. Later on, we all gather. But before we gathered, sort of towards the end of the time, we suddenly heard singing coming from the third floor. And I had another volunteer with me too. And we kind of look at each other. And I said, um, what's going on the third floor? I've never heard her sing up there before. Is she okay? And that volunteer went up and said, yeah, she seems to be fine. She had music on her mind and was singing to the spirits. So I'm doing a bad job with this story, folks. Later on, we come downstairs. 90% of the people have left, and it's just me and the other volunteers. And I said, we heard you singing up on the third floor, but we didn't recognize the song. And she said, oh, yeah, it's this kind of popular song that's out right now. And I really like it. And I just suddenly felt I should sing. And she said, it's got a really neat music video. Do you want to see it? We said, sure. So she pulls it up on her phone. The music video starts off with a person closing their eyes and falling backwards into a tub of water. So,
That's so wild.
without her having heard me suggest to talk to the dead, a lot of people find it useful to find a spot and meditate on themselves falling backwards. She had felt moved to sing a song on the third floor, and the video for the song starts off with a person falling backwards into water. So we were kind of joking that the spirits were basically inspiring her on which song to sing. It was just kind of neat. So, again, as we're talking about falling backwards, I find it interesting that Samael says that the backwards is a reaching back towards the dead, because essentially, when you go back to reach for your previous incarnations, that's also what you're doing
Yeah. And
towards yourself.
it
Yeah.
makes me wonder also. I think of that backwards rotation thing, that I was just describing. It seems like it would be a very useful thing to do, the leaning backwards, the arching backwards, and the rotating back, to go back and, for people who want to go back and pick up these breadcrumbs and tap back into the knowledge and wisdom that they had, or the skills that they had in other lifetimes. Those things only happen for me without intentionally doing it. Like, I'm not consciously, I guess. I'm sure I'm intentionally doing it, but consciously I don't go, oh, okay, I'd like to do this. I'm going to set up a sacred space and I'm going to rotate backwards. But then you were just talking about the other as a method, something that people do intentionally to go, okay, I want to do this. I want to be able to communicate with the dead. I'm going to envision going backwards. I'm wondering then if what I'm doing is something that could kind of be taught to people to be able to do as a technique intentionally, of saying, hey, I'm exploring this. I feel drawn to it. I feel like there's a memory, there's more to this of my being attracted to it, and I want to go back and connect. And that people could then do that, maybe then as a technique, as opposed to just kind of waiting to be in the right place at the right time and the right combination of things and the energy telling you to do that, which is probably a lot more rare.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because if you think about it, I mean, this is a technique that I hear it from lots of people. I know someone who is a well-known necromancer, and there have been times when we've been talking about particular spirits, and they'll say, well, why don't we check this out? And will walk me through a little quick meditation of let yourself fall back, right? Um, so that technique is something that's in our culture, which means we've left it for ourselves, most likely, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Samael also had this to say: when you fall backwards, you let yourself fall. Forward is intentional. Diving is that's where I'm going. Here's where my hands are going. You're pushing yourself towards something. Backwards is trust and release.
Oh, wow. So it's
And
not a I'm going to throw myself backwards. Like I'm not going to go do a back handspring into this. I'm going to set a sacred space, set the stage, set the intention, and I'm going to allow myself to fall back and to fall into and be held and led to exactly the platform and exactly the information that I'm meant to receive.
he says, and now, what does fallen angel mean?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when he said to fall. He was like, it's falling. I was like, oh, here we
Right.
go.
So, and he's talked before about the fall, right? So, that the idea of being a fallen angel is not that you were kicked out of some place, but that you let yourself fall. And so that's what they did. It was an act of trust and release. And exactly what you just said, I'm allowing whatever is going to happen, despite my fear, despite the fact that I can't see what's ahead. I am letting this go and falling and expecting that I will land somewhere that I'm supposed to be.
It's
So
so
that makes,
fascinating too. When I think back on what I was doing in that circle in the times when that happened, I didn't have an agenda. I didn't have
mm,
all right, we need to set this up, or I want to work with this, or I want to learn about whatever. I just was sitting there and saying, okay, I've awakened this space, I've opened this space, and I'm sitting here, and I just want to say, I'm here and I've shown up. I've shown up to learn and continue this process and continue my growth. What do you have for me?
yeah,
And that was what I had put out. And that's how I kept ending up, I think, going backwards. It would be as a result of a very open ended, I'm here. I've made space and time for us to connect and for me to learn and be led. I'm not coming in with an agenda. What do you have for me? And that's when it happened.
yeah, he just said a fall has no structure. You fall into bed at night, or a child is learning to walk and they fall. Fall is a collapse of plans and structure, right?
Yeah.
Nobody plans, I'm going to get up and fall down.
Yeah. A
It's
letting
when,
go of it.
yeah, it's when things boom, like you are allowing them to, or you might not want it to be that way, but things, people talk about falling apart. It's a collapse of structure. And we try very hard to walk through our days and make sure they're structured. I'm going to get to this meeting, then I'm going to do this. I have a to-do list, I have a plan. This is my target, this is my aim. These are the goals I intend to meet. But he just said, as he likes to say, to fall in truth is to be blessed. Like, uh, it is. Oh, he said, there is no fall from grace. Falling is grace.
Oh, I like that.
Hold me write that down. Falling is grace.
Grace.
It is the collapse of structure. And it immediately gives you a different perspective. It is immediately humbling. It puts you immediately in your body. It is the movement from one state to another.
Yeah.
Those things can all bring grace.
And he was just saying that a break is evolution.
Yeah, a break is evolution.
Yeah.
Break
So,
is
like,
evolution.
when there's that collapse of the structure, that which we've talked about in a grand societal kind of sense, that there has
Hmm.
to be a breaking down of the structure in order for the evolution to happen, in order for something new to come up. That, in the breaking of the structure and the falling in all of that, then is an evolution.
Yeah, and it takes me back to there's a, I don't know if you'd call it a poem, but there's a dictation Samael, something he had me write down probably 2 years ago. It was him talking to Lilith. It was one of the first times I'd ever heard him really talk about her. And it is a portrayal of the two of them standing on a hill, watching walls be torn down in a city. And there's a line in it that says something like, and then heaven will be all places. And the idea that as the structure breaks down, the walls that we use to say, here is where certain people belong and here is where others don't, that when you tear down the walls, the wild comes in. And he says that the wild is the closest experience to being in the all that an incarnated human can have. So the idea is if we tear down the walls and we let our wilderness in, we let our wildness, we let our impurity, we let these things run, then heaven is all places because there's no walls to keep it out. And he's using heaven as a concept, this idea of unity, this idea of being returned home. So, yeah.
That
Whoa,
is,
that's a lot.
yeah. Wow, this is so enlightening. I'm like, my brain is just kind of exploding from all of the ideas and the new pieces coming in.
Well, it's also to go back a little bit, kind of making me go, ah, because, he talks about these 8-day teachers and lists himself and then Lilith and then Agret. And if he's talking about Agret's work with us right now, it means we have 5 to go.
Yeah. And if each
So,
one sort of adds it's like each one is going to then multiply exponentially the number of edges and
yeah,
lines and um, connections, because we went from a Samuel that's almost like zero, like before
yeah,
the thing, to Lilith that was one. And now
yep,
we have two additional, like two lines with Agret, because we have
yep,
the yellow to green and the green to blue.
right.
Then with the next one, it kind of stands to that, like how he was talking about, like, now what
Next,
if
we
we're
have
talking about three and
3.
then five? Didn't he, because he, did he go from three to five?
Let me see. So many notes now. Oh, he said 3 to 4, I think.
Three to four. Because I was
He
thinking, I
just,
was
it
like,
was
I
just a
wondered
side comment.
geometrically, kind of as things extend, it's like like a cell cleaves in half and then those cleave in half, and then
Yeah.
you end up where things are exponentially growing.
He says, wait until I teach you to dance between 3 states, umshallah, or 4. And then what I also found interesting was the sort of throwaway comment um about Metatron's cube. Like, how would you figure out how many lines are there? And also, we were talking about portals and gates before, that I've seen a gate and you've seen a gate, but we saw it from different perspectives. If we do look at a piece of sacred geometry like Metatron's cube, are we only seeing one side of it?
Yeah, because the Metatron's, when you think about it, Metatron's cube is, it's a three-dimensional object. So we, a lot of times we look at it, drawn in 2 dimensions, but it's actually a three-dimensional object, which I'm sure is a lot more dimensions than that. And when you
Yeah.
think about it, as you turn that, your perspective on absolutely every angle and every line changes, because certain lines overlap then and sort of blend into one. Others seem like, it seems like the shape changes depending on how you view it. Yeah, and then given that we're obviously talking about lots more dimensions than three,
Yeah. Well,
how many perspectives of that, like how many dimensions are there, and how does it even exist? What are lines and shapes like in these additional dimensions?
I don't want to like freak anybody out. Like he is now literally going 64 on 64 on 64 on 64. And I'm like, are all of those ons multiplied bys? I think he's playing around with eight because we know eight is a number associated with Metatron, right? Eight times eight is 64 times 64 times 64. Oh no. Okay, no, I'm not going down this. I'm not going down
Yeah,
this.
just going to continue to exponentially
Yeah. Oh, and now we're getting Metatron, Metatron, Metatron.
grow.
Praise his holy name. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay. So you had questions about gates two
Yeah,
and
I'm
a half
thinking,
hours
I'm
ago.
like, okay, do we have time for a question about
Yeah,
gates? Or I'm
now the
trying to figure
Q&A
out.
section.
Yeah, so I'm
I
trying to
mean,
figure out the best question based on this. Okay, so I guess my core question, since you just mentioned it, and I don't know that it's so much a question as could he expound upon it, which he's kind of already just touched into it. So I feel like this makes sense to as to where to go. So, we have a whole podcast, and it's probably a multiple episode one where we, Tava was woken up in the middle of the night and saw a gate. And it was the gate, and Samuel said it was a gate fixing itself or being repaired. And it was like a circle with all of these different numbers that were all less than one, I believe,
hmm,
all on there and kind of moving and twisting and changing rapidly. So then I had an experience in February when I was connecting with Archangel Michael, and I was asking him what the first step in the path of Amnivara is. What am I supposed to be bringing through? And he showed me this whole elaborate thing. I knew it had to do with him, or there was going to be like an attunement to him. And I was asking for details about it, thinking I was going to get details like, oh, first you're going to tell them this, and then you're going to tell them this. And instead, I ended up seeing this very elaborate three-dimensional thing where there were these cylinders that were like concentric cylinders, like nesting dolls of cylinders. And each cylinder had kind of like a doorway cut in it, like this tall rectangle slit like inside them. And each of the cylinders was had enough depth that it was like there was sort of a platform, like threshold in between them. And they were all spinning in different directions. Like some of them were spinning clockwise, some were spinning counterclockwise, and those slits then would very, very momentarily overlap. And Michael was showing me this thing where it seemed like it was almost like he was at the center of them, or yeah, I guess he was like at the center of it. And it was like he sang through them. And the image I got was that he was singing through, it was like his song went through all of the various slits in a very specific way and left behind his energetic signature. And that I had this experience of stepping into like the first threshold kind of slit. And then once I was fully present in that one moment where it was all about being present in that spot, the next slit would suddenly line up and stop so that I could step forward into that one. And then the one behind me left, and it just continued until I'd made my way through to him. And it seemed like I was being shown how he was opening this angelic gateway for people that he would be opening this angelic gateway, and it was like lock picking. And that the thing that I kept thinking about in the visual way he was showing me is like, if you've ever looked up how to pick locks, there's this whole thing of getting like one slit and then holding that and then getting the next slit little in place. And it's like all of these different sorts of cogs kind of line up. And I felt like there was something about what he was showing me was that like there's a big energetic difference maybe in vibration between where he is and where we are, because he's an archangel, and that it was like it allowed a way through to where we could meet in a place and meet in a much closer, more intimate kind of way. And it hit me later on that night after that experience. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I've seen a gate also. I've just seen it from a different perspective. And I'd had a dream where I was shown, it was like I was teaching a child about time. And I was taking like an empty paper towel roll, you know, like the thing at the center of a paper towel roll. And I'd marked on the paper towel roll lengthwise time, like, you know, here's now, and then, you know, like a timeline. And then I turned the paper towel roll so you were looking straight through it. And it was like, this is more of like what time is, where how all of that is still together. And the sense was that I was seeing the gate from the perspective of the side of the paper towel roll with all the slits, and that Tava had seen the gate from turning the paper towel roll on the end and looking down the tube. And I was wondering, is that kind of an accurate supposition that what we were both seeing were gates, but we were seeing them from a different perspective?
Okay. He is going into some. Okay. Okay. Apparently, this also gets back to the concept of rotation here. But he said, I'm going to try to. I was making little notes. He says Michael cuts gates, bonds, and openings. He says that you were seeing a gate from Michael's side, that you were standing in a place, you were visiting or standing in a place that was not this world, whereas I was seeing what a gate looks like from here in reality on this side.
Gotcha.
So mine looked one way. You were basically had the inside, like almost like I'm standing on the outside of a locked room and you're standing on the inside of the room. So yes, you had a different perspective. You were watching sort of things generate and come into being, and stuff being opened, and all of the energy stuff that happens there. While as I was sort of seeing the final effect of it from this concrete reality here, what it looks
Gotcha.
like on my side. Um, he keeps saying they need to be, well, he briefly went off into, and I don't know anything about this. He mentioned camera obscura. Do you know anything about camera obscura? He just said the phrase, and I don't know.
Camera obscura. I am not familiar here. I can look it up real quick.
I know I'm going to do the same thing here. Real time on the podcast. You can hear us looking up things on the internet.
Okay.
Okay.
Camera obscura, quote, dark chamber, is a natural optical phenomenon where light traveling through a small hole in a dark space projects an inverted, reversed image of the outside world on an opposite surface. So, you know how I think there's a whole thing like where if you have some sort of camera, like you need to have another mirror in order for us not to look upside down through a lens. There has to be like an additional mirror, I think, that kind of reflects it back again so that the projection doesn't look upside down. I'm guessing it's like a matter of the perspective that I got to see it through Michael's perspective,
Was
when
the
it goes
opposite.
through sort of like the whole to our reality, maybe, it projects an inverted, reversed, so it's inverted and reversed image of the outside world onto the opposite surface.
This is crazy. Like he just said camera obscura, and I'm like, I think he's trying to emphasize, but this is so interesting. It wasn't invented by any one person, but was used, developed over centuries by lots of different people. And you can perfectly capture the world around you by projecting what's on the outside down into a darkened space on the inside. I think he's trying to like make an analogy here, but I'm not sure. He just said it. So there was that, but then he also went off onto a side tangent here at one point and said, how will people approach the gate of Amnivara? They need to be spun. I don't know what that means,
They
but
need
I
to be
think
spun.
fun. I think what he's trying to say is that you weren't just seeing things from Michael's perspective. Hold on, what's Samuel? You weren't just being shown this to see a gate, you were shown it so that you would contemplate the gates that need to be opened for people to access Omnivara. So you were allowed to see Michael's work from the inside. Whereas at the time when I was viewing a gate, I was concerned about a broken gate for the dead on the second floor of the inn. He was letting me watch it be equalized and repaired. So my seeing a gate had a different purpose than what your seeing of the gate was. I get the feeling that yours was more like mine was more like, oh, you're worried about this. Let's sort of show you that things, let's show you the effect of the actions you all have taken to try and balance things out. Look, it's being repaired. Whereas yours was more, you have work to do and things you need to contemplate because you're going to have to lead people through certain gates. Let's have you stand next to Michael and sort of contemplate the nature of gate as part of your education. I think we were standing in two different places. We were there for two different purposes. Mine, yeah, Samael says, I was looking at a gate for the dead, whereas you were looking, yeah, your gate was for a different purpose. They were also two slightly different types of gates.
Yeah, I was
We
going to
were
say
both looking at
definitely
them.
different. And
Yes.
there was a very instructive aspect of it that included this sense that you had, it was like you couldn't step from platform to platform and the next platform wouldn't appear until you had completely let go of the idea that you were walking from platform to platform to get somewhere else. You had to step into that platform, be completely present and here for the sake of being here. And only when you had achieved that would the next platform align and you were able to step forward into the next threshold. But it was like you couldn't do it with the intention of moving forward. It had to be a matter of being fully present in each moment and letting go of the outcome of the next one. And that's how I would do it. And he had shown me that it's like once you've gone through it once, then it was like you could do it over and over. You would get faster and faster at it each time you did it until you'd be able to just sort of step in and move through it. And that each person's rings, like the rings of each of the concentric cylinders that you step through, were different thicknesses and would take different amounts of time. Some had lots and lots of really thin ones, some had like fewer and that were a lot thicker.
Yep. And Samael just said, Michael, that he said, your purpose is to lead incarnated souls to Amnivara, and that the description you just gave is something you are going to need to tell people who want to journey to Omnivara and study there. This is what it will feel like. If you're if you're focused on the end goal, you're not going to be there. You have to stay on the platform that you're on right now, and different platforms will take different types of time. But essentially, Michael was giving you an illustration of what walking through gates on the Omnivara path would be like so you could describe them to your students. Samael says, all he was trying to show me was this is how the dead travel. So yours was like a whole, when you meet with people, like all the things you just said, it felt like each one took a different amount of time. It felt like you had to get past the idea that you were standing on a platform. Like all of those things will need to be imparted to your students and say, as you go on this journey, this may be what it feels like pass through, to be in your first gate or pass through your next part, or all those different parts that you have broken down with the bridge and approaching the temple. Michael was giving you a little briefing of tell people here is what it might feel like so that they're not worried. You're going to be leading incarnated souls on a journey. Whereas with me, Samuel's like, yeah, stop worrying. This is how the dead travel. The gate's fixed. Go
Well,
back to
and then,
sleep, kid.
well, and yeah, well, and in fairness, you were woken up in the middle of the night and just been like, here you go, here's a gate. And I'd set up this whole ceremonial space and I'd set aside time and I'd called in all this stuff and was asking for discernment. And when this was then like, what was that? Like, but
Yeah.
I knew the feeling of it and I was like, why? And I was thinking, well, if he's opening the gate, why is it
Yeah.
that important for me to understand? I was like, I mean, I love understanding the intricate details of exactly how everything works. And so I thought, well, maybe it's just to satisfy that, like, he's really detail oriented. Let me show you in a way that I can get. But it sounds like there's a lot of information here that's actually a part of the whole journey, that's more
Yes.
illustrative of the whole journey that people are going on, not just the details of how he opens the gate in that attunement to help people go through, which is really interesting because I've been contemplating that thought of, and I had this whole, I guess, just almost like channeled writing conversation with him the other day. And it really became a how to help people with their expectations of what's going to happen when they
Yes.
receive this gate opening. And I realized that the expectation is I'm instantly going to be, it's going to be like Tava and Samael. Boom, there's Michael. It's like he just walked in the room, he sat on the couch, and now we're going to have a conversation. And realizing that there needed to be a lot of scaffolding around the what are our expectations, and looking at what are our expectations, what would success look like, how are we going to take the information that's coming towards us, are we going to just have blinders on and go, well, if it doesn't seem like he walked in the room and sat down, then it's a failure, or
Right.
what is the end goal, and that it's going to require an understanding. And it sounds like using the idea of the cylinders is really a good thing. It's like,
Yeah.
things are being open, but each step on this path is going to require its own acceptance of being present and
Yes.
here for the
Yes.
sake of
Yes.
being present and not because I want to get to that.
Exactly. And I think, it's like when you teach somebody about Reiki, if they've never had an experience like that before, they're going to be like, well, what does it feel like? How do I know that the thing that I'm feeling is energy moving, like what's it going to feel like? And so if you that whole description that you gave there about you're moving from one thing to another, and you have to wait a period of time between this and this, some periods of time are going to be longer than others, so that people don't come in with a preconceived notion, and they also know, like, oh yeah, this thing takes more time than some of the others, this takes a short period. That experience that you had can be a useful tool in communicating to people what it's like to watch this gate open in their own lives. Um, Whereas I didn't really have to pass on the thing that I saw to anybody else. It was just, hey, you get up, look at all the pretty numbers. Yeah, gate's fixed. Okay, back to bed.
I'm so glad
Yeah.
you did though, because think about it. I mean, that spurred this
Yeah.
whole huge, it was really instructive because it spurred a whole different series of understandings and ways of looking at things. And I know I have to go, but
Oh, goodness, it is.
maybe for our next podcast, we can ask, because the other thing was like the gate, for example, at the inn, where does it go exactly? Because I was leading
Yes.
the pastor to it as though it was like, this takes you into the all, but it seems like people are coming like, is that a gate directly into the all? Like if you cross through that gate, are you kind of instantly back into that remembering state where it's like, oh, okay, I get it? Or does it depend on who's passing through it and what their intentions are or where they are on their path? Like, does it sort of baby step us just to the next place, or it's like it's still the same gateway, but depending on where you are in your path, where you land on the other side is different, or does everybody land in the same place?
He just said gates can change destinations. And I know you have to go, but I think we definitely should go into this. It sounds like it's not just one place.
Yeah,
And
that's what
that,
I was wondering. Yeah, so
yeah,
the
yeah,
gates change
gates
destinations.
can
Was that how I
change
said?
destinations. Yeah, I thought this is so this gate stuff is so interesting. But
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
so
I'm really
curious about the
excited.
yeah, this is a lot of stuff today. And now
Yeah.
I'm dying to look up camera obscura and figure out more about what the heck he just went camera obscura and then started talking. So
Yeah, and
I
then there
don't
were
know.
all these things of how to build your own camera obscura with like a box and tape and paper and a source and stuff. So that's going to be really interesting too. I'm
And-
thinking, I'll see if I can get a song real quick.
Okay.
So I'll just share real quickly that I had this deep sense while I was singing that there was this message of wherever you are on your path, you're in exactly the right place. Like it is a blessing to be where you are and not to compare where you are with other people or where you are with where you think you should be, but that it's a blessing to be exactly where you are, and wherever you are is exactly where you're meant to be, and to accept that blessing.
Music was really, really lovely. And I think that message is really lovely too. Um, Samuel actually drew me a diagram that we can dive into next week. But he did have something for us to meditate on at the end of the day. And I'm going to have to look this up too and see what this is. What is the nature of illusion, Shala? What illusions do we hold about our own healing? And, like a trotting horse lantern, what is the role of stillness in our motion? It sounds like stillness and motion are going to be two states we might need to dance between soon, huh?
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I am. I can't wait to keep going. This is one of those times when it's probably a good thing that I have an appointment, because otherwise we would just do this until our brains turn to
That
mush.
is absolutely true. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. I know it was a lot. We will continue next week, and perhaps we can dive a little bit into illusion, stillness, and motion.
And how the gates go as well as
How the
to
gates go.
how, oh
And
my goodness,
and as Jen said, wherever you are right now is where you are meant to be.
see it as the blessing that it is.
And may balance come to all of your unsettled puzzle pieces. We'll talk to you soon.
Many blessings.